Shalom, shalom, and good morning, my friends. Welcome to the Early Tide, formerly known as Turn the Tide Thursdays. I'm Desert Mermaid. Some of you may know me as Mermaid Cora, and I am so glad that you can tune in today. I am going to be playing around with the different time frames. I don't really have a set time frame for the early tide yet. I'm just looking to transition as life gets busier. But go ahead and feel free to get settled in on this beautiful Saturday. Put your fins up and let's listen and enjoy a Nancy Drew mystery book. If you do share, please go ahead and use the hashtag #EarlyTide. And you can always go to YouTube later when I upload. Anyways, let's get into our reading. It's been a couple of weeks, but I was beginning to read Nancy Drew, case number 16, The Clue of the Tapping Heels. So far, we've learned there's a mystery at a house. A nurse is taking care of a woman that is post-surgery and needs help getting around and eating of a such. However, they're hearing random tapping sounds at night and just robberies might be taking place, some strange stuff. So they asked Nancy Drew, amateur detective, to look and see if they could figure out anything. Or if she could figure out anything. And of course, she invited her BFFs, George and Bess. Also, while Nancy's working this case, she is also working on a play and part of a theater group where she actually does tap dancing. Anyways, we are to start. So, yeah, that's the recap. The last thing was Nancy was practicing for the play when Ned had dropped her off or come with her. Ned Nickerson, her special friend. Someone she dates a lot. And she was supposed to get on stage when she saw someone was starting to get in like a fight with Ned. So she got a little bit distracted because she was like, I wonder if this person has anything to do with the mystery. And also like, you okay, Ned? So we're gonna go ahead and start chapter 5, Mysterious Key. Miss Drew, what's the matter? Mr. Skate cried out. It's your turn. Dance. Nancy paid no attention. She dashed across the stage, leapt down the steps, and ran up the center aisle of the auditorium to the main corridor. As she burst through the door and looked down the hallway, she recognized Ned's assailant as the pudgy man who had followed her in the black sedan. Well, quick recap. Nancy was being followed on her way back from the home of the mystery to her home in River Heights. Let's keep going. He was reeling from a blow Ned had delivered, but the man retaliated with a swift punch that staggered Ned. Seeing Nancy, the intruder ran out the front door. She hurried after him, but by the time Nancy had covered the distance to the outside of the building, he was not in sight. She knew it was hopeless to try finding him and disappointingly returned to the corridor. Ned, what happened? She asked. Are you all right? He smiled grimly. Yes, that fellow sure delivers a mean uppercut, he said. Nancy asked Ned why he had left the auditorium so hurriedly. He said that a boy had come down the aisle and handed him a hand-printed note. Ned pulled it from his pocket and gave it to Nancy to read. You are to get out of the picture. Nancy Drew has another study now. Come to the corridor and you will find out. Of course I went to see what it was all about, Ned explained. I think I let go with a punch and knocked me off balance. But what brought you to the corridor? I just happened to see that punch, she replied. I feel responsible, Ned, and I'm dreadfully sorry. Ned grinned. Just so long as you don't have another study date, I'll forgive you for anything. Nancy laughed. Thanks, Ned. Why don't you go to my house and put something on that jaw? Dad can pick me up later. Nothing doing. I'll go find some ice water in this building and doctor myself. You go back to the rehearsal. That director must be furious. As Nancy turned to leave, she noticed a key on the floor. Is this yours, Ned? She asked. No. When I knocked that man down, the key must have fallen out of his pocket. It looks like a car key, Nancy said. The key might lead to your attacker. Ned, will you call the police and ask them to come here? All right. There was a telephone booth nearby, and he headed for it while Nancy went back to the auditorium. When she returned to the stage, Mr. Skink had some pretty harsh words for her. He ended by saying, I don't relish staying here all night, and you've certainly held up the works, Miss Drew. Before Nancy had a chance to explain, one of the girls in the cast called out, You don't know, Mr. Skink, but Nancy is an amateur detective. She probably had to leave in a hurry in connection with some case. Is that true? The director asked. My apologies. Before Nancy had a chance to explain, one of the girls in the cast called out, You don't know it, Mr. Skink, but Nancy is an amateur detective. She probably had to leave in a hurry in connection with some case. Is that true? The director asked. Nancy nodded but did not offer any other explanation. Mr. Skink made no further comment about the interruption. Do your dance, Miss Drew. Music, please. Nancy, desiring to make amends for her sudden leave-taking, performed perfectly. Grudgingly, Mr. Skink praised her. The rest of the rehearsal went smoothly. Nancy felt that in her final tap number she had not danced so well as she could. She mentioned this to Ned as they started for home. I didn't notice anything wrong, he said, but if you weren't satisfied, I'm sure it was a combination of weariness and excitement. You've had a big day. Nancy had to admit that it did seem long, and she was ready for a good night's sleep. When they arrived at the Drew home, Nancy's father was watching a late movie on TV. He looked at Ned and asked, Were you in an accident? Ooh, No, Mr. Drew, but I had a chance to wallop that guy who was following Nancy this afternoon. The lawyer grinned. Good for you. Did you put him in the hospital? Wish I had, Ned responded, then explained what had happened. Mr. Drew insisted that Ned stay overnight. The young man accepted and said he must be off very early in the morning. But I'll be back tomorrow night to take Nancy to the rehearsal, he added. Hannah Gruen quickly prepared a snack and then announced that she knew just the thing to put on Ned's jaw. She went to get a soothing lotion and soaked a bandage with it. Keep this wet compress on all night, and I guarantee that tomorrow morning you'll look like yourself again, she said. The housekeeper's prediction came true. Breakfast was served early, and Ned showed no effects of his fight with the pudgy man, except one little black and blue mark on his cheek. Hannah was pleased and said she had used a homemade remedy of hers that never failed. Ned smiled. Maybe you should patent it and go into business. Quick cure, quick money. I'll think about it, Mrs. Gruen said, chuckling. Ned left in a few minutes, and Nancy helped Hannah with some household chores. Then she set off for Berryville in Ned's car. On the way, she stopped at River Heights Police Headquarters to find out if the officers had traced the owner of the key she had picked up at the high school. Sergeant Rothman, who was on duty, said that it had been determined it was not a car key and he doubted that anyone would claim it. Would you like it back? He asked Nancy. Yes, I would. She had a strong hunch that the key might lead to something important in regard to the pudgy man. Nancy put the key in her purse and left headquarters. When she arrived at Miss Carter's, Nancy parked Ned's car in front of the garage. Hearing voices inside the building, she called out, Hi, I'm back. Bess and George greeted her as she stepped into the garage. How's everything? Nancy asked. Bess heaved a sigh. Okay, but I'm so tired of opening cans of cat food. I never want to see another one in my whole life. Let me help you, Nancy said. Suppose you girls take a rest while I serve the cats their breakfast and you tell me about your evening. George grinned. All we can report is a big 0. No thieves, no tappers, no prowlers, no intruders, not even a mouse. How about the rehearsal, Nancy? When Nancy finished telling about her eventful evening, the cousins looked at each other in amazement. George remarked, Wouldn't you know Nancy would have all the excitement? That suits me, said Bess. I got a good night's sleep, and I've nothing to worry about. Nancy went into the house to put on blue jeans, loafers, and a shirt so she could help Bess and George clean the cage. It took them until late morning, and Bess declared she was absolutely starved. I hope Mrs. Beeling had a good lunch for us, she said, leading the way into the kitchen. Mmm, chicken salad with fresh tomatoes. And girls, look at that big chocolate cake. Bess Marvin, George said severely, you leave that chocolate cake alone. Every time you take off a few pounds, you put them right back on. Bess looked at the cake wistfully. Should she pay attention to George, who she knew was right, or should she enjoy the luscious dessert? To herself, she said, I won't decide now. Maybe, just maybe, I'll be satisfied with a chicken salad and a little bitsy piece of cake. This did not prove to be the case, and later when Bess cut a slice for herself, it was so wide that even Miss Carter had to laugh. She eased the tension, however, by saying, I've always felt that the place to diet is in one's own home, not in someone else's. Bess beamed at her. I could hug you for that, Miss Carter. After lunch, the actress was carried upstairs for her nap. The girls helped Mrs. Beeling with the luncheon dishes. Then the nurse said she would like to run downtown. A kind neighbor across the street has offered to take me shopping. Will you girls please answer the phone and the doorbell? Yes, indeed, Nancy replied. And Bess added, Bring home something extra special to eat, will you? Mrs. Beeling laughed. When she had gone, Nancy suggested that the girls go to the basement once more to try to find out why the tapper had been there. I'm sure he was hunting for something, she said. It reminded the others about the mysterious telephone caller. He may have meant secrets to do with this house. She led the way to the basement. The door to the kitchen was left open so they could hear anyone who might call. A second intensive search of the room was begun. Except for occasional conversation among the girls, there was total silence in the house. They were investigating a far corner when Bess suddenly grabbed Nancy's arm. I hear it, she said. I hear it, she said in a hushed voice. The tapping. It's upstairs somewhere. On tiptoe, the girls dashed to the steps and rushed up to the kitchen. Chapter 6. The Secret Room. The three girls quickly went through all the first floor rooms, opening closet doors along the way. No one was hiding, and there was no visible footprints or fingerprints to indicate that anyone from the outside had sneaked in. The tapping must have come from the second floor, Nancy whispered. I wonder if Miss Carter heard it or if she's asleep. Bess and George went up the back stairway to the second floor, while Nancy took the front. Each bedroom was investigated, but there was not a sign of an intruder. Finally, they arrived at Miss Carter's closed door. No sound came from within. Even if she's asleep, I think we should wake her up, Nancy said. She knocked, and in a few seconds the actress's sleepy voice called in. Come in. She was still in bed. At once, Nancy apologized for having awakened her. Weird tapping sounds in the house. Were you knocking on the wall? No, my dear. Did you hear the tapping sounds? George asked the actress. Miss Carter gave the girl a most engaging smile. When I take a nap, I'm practically unconscious, she replied. Bess said feelingly, Please go back to sleep. When you wake up, I'll bring you tea and cookies. That's very sweet of you, Miss Carter said. The girls retreated and closed the door. In the hall, Nancy reminded her friends that the tapper might have been up on the third floor, but had come down and escaped from the house before they had left Miss Carter's room. They went up the attic and walked around. Nothing here, said George. Maybe not, Nancy replied, but somebody has been in this attic. How do you know? Bess spoke up. That chest has been moved, Nancy answered. I'm positive it was over here before. The girls shifted several other objects, hoping to find a clue to the mystery, but they saw no trace of a trap door or loose boards. Well, I guess it's back to the basement, George said. Okay, Nancy? Okay. When they reached the basement, Nancy stood in the center of the floor and slowly turned in circles. Bess and George watched their friend in fascination. They knew enough not to ask what was going through her mind. Presently, Nancy stopped turning and walked over to the rear wall of the basement. She tapped on the panels. Girls, she said, do you realize that this basement is not so large as the first floor of the house? I hadn't noticed, Bess replied. But what you say isn't unusual, is it? Lots of people have a small cellar compared to the size of their house. Suddenly, Nancy said, Wait here. She dashed up the stairs and outdoors. The youngsters walked round and round the house, examining the foundation. Finally, she went back to the basement and beamed her flashlight inch by inch along the rear wall. What do you suspect? George finally asked, curiosity getting the better of her. An opening in this wall, Nancy answered. Suppose you girls start at the other end and hunt for a clue. Just before they all reached the center of the wall, Bess exclaimed, Here's a place that looks as if a rat had gnawed it. Nancy studied the edge of the beveled board. She tried pulling it forward with her fingernails. Though it moved a fraction of an inch, she could not budge it any further. George was already looking around for a tool and found one made of steel with a hooked end. Sounds like a crowbar. It was lying on a shelf above the panel. She inserted the hook in the gouged out spot. Be careful, Bess warned. We don't know what may be behind that wood. Some hidden object could shoot out and harm us. George had dug the hook deep into the wood, and with Nancy's help, the panel began to move. When it turned at right angles to the wall, Nancy showed her flashlight beyond. The three girls gasped. Before them was a fully furnished bedroom. The bed has been slept in recently, Bess exclaimed. It's a secret room, Nancy cried out. Oh, girls, this is a wonderful clue. There is a switch just inside the movable panel, which illuminated 3 lamps. An open door to one side revealed a fully furnished bathroom. Nancy hurried inside and felt a towel and washcloth. They're damp, she called. Someone has been here very recently. I'm sure this is the hideout of the tapper. And here's his razor, said George, rushing in. Bess admitted that she was frightened. The intruder certainly had a key to this house, she declared. I think all the locks should be changed at once. Nancy agreed. Bess offered to go tell Miss Carter, even if she had to awaken her again. And I'll attend to getting a locksmith to come here this very afternoon, she added. After Bess had left, Nancy and George searched the small bedroom for clues to the identity of the occupant. There was a cot, and along one wall stood a highboy. Another was a series of cupboards that reached from the floor to the ceiling. One had a grilled metal front, but the others were of solid wood. All the doors were locked. The girls opened the highboy drawers, but found nothing. George stared at the cupboards. I sure wish we could get a look inside. I wonder, said Nancy, if by any chance that pudgy man lives in this room and the key he dropped might open these cupboards. I'll get it. She went upstairs and took the key from her purse. Nancy was back in a few minutes and inserted the key in the lock. It fits, she exclaimed. One by one, the cupboards were opened. There were several books in one. The others held boxes of letters and other papers. They're all addressed to William Wunton. At this address, Nancy said after examining several. And here's a diary, George spoke up, lifting a book from underneath a pile of papers. It says Diary of Gus Wunton. Wunton. Probably Wunton. Woonton. Wunton. There might be tomatoes tomorrow. The girls began to turn the leaves of the diary. The notations were startling. They told of Gus Wunton being kept prisoner in the windowless room with only a small duct in the ceiling for fresh air. One item read, This is the work of my crazy guardians who are taking care of me while my parents are traveling for a year. My guardians declare I'm crazy and have to be locked up, but it is the other way around. But I'll get square with them. Every time they let me out of here, I'll take. The sentence was not finished, and though the girls scanned the book thoroughly, they could find no clue as how to Gus was getting square with his guardians or what he planned to take. Do you suppose, said George, that the pudgy man could be Gus Wunton? And he's the tapper? Anything is possible, Nancy replied. I wonder where he goes when he isn't in this room. Without waiting for a response from George, she went on, I guess we better lock this cupboard and close that panel into the other part of the basement. She chuckled. Poor Gus. When he comes here for another night's sleep, he won't be able to get in. Why not? George asked. He can use the same hook he always does. Nancy smiled. We'll take the key and the tool upstairs and hide them. I suppose this room is where the tapper hides. Now maybe we or the police will be able to nab him. George and Nancy went to Miss Carter's room. Mrs. Beeling had returned. Both women were astounded at the discovery the girl detectives had made, but Miss Carter could throw no light on Gus Woonton or his parents or guardians. I'll call my lawyer, Carl Amberson, at once and ask him who owned the house before the Smiths did, she said. The girls were near the phone and could hear Mr. Amberson's voice very clearly. Not only was he surprised at the strange happenings, but said that the William Woontons had indeed owned the house at one time. I did not know they had a son, Gus, and I have no idea where they might be. I'll try to find out, though, and let you know. After Miss Carter finished speaking with Mr. Amberson, Nancy asked permission to turn this part of the mystery over to her father. He has traced many lost persons, she said. The actress agreed, and Nancy telephoned Mr. Drew. He, too, was amazed at the turn of events and promised to do what he could. A few minutes later, Bess arrived with a locksmith. The man worked for over an hour to change all the locks, including those on the garage, then went off. Now I feel safe, Beth said with a sigh as she turned over the keys to Miss Carter. They were about to start preparations for dinner when the telephone rang. Mr. Drew was calling Nancy. I have some very important information for you, he said. I think you'd better come home as soon as possible, and be sure to bring the diary and the cupboard key. Chapter 7. So sorry. All right, Chapter 7, The Runaway. Can't you tell me now what you found out? Nancy asked her father. He laughed. I think the matter should be kept secret for the present. Anyway, I'd rather not discuss it on the phone. Here's more news. The Fanes and Marvins want Bess and George to come home. There's a special family party being held out of town tonight that they're to attend. Nancy was a bit alarmed about leaving Miss Carter and Mrs. Beeling alone. Apparently, Mr. Drew guessed her thought. I know you don't want to desert the Amity Place mystery, he said. So I have persuaded Hannah to stay with Miss Carter while you girls have to be away. She'll take a taxi out there. Oh, Dad, you think of everything, Nancy said. Mr. Drew told her a client was waiting, so he would have to say goodbye. I'll see you later. Nancy gave his message to Bess and George. Mrs. Beeling was delighted to hear that her friend Hannah Gruen was coming to spend a little time at Miss Carter's. She's such a capable person to have around. She certainly is, Nancy agreed. Bess and George had exchanged guilty glances. Both admitted they had completely forgotten the family party. George said, Nancy, you always pick up such fascinating mysteries. You make us forget our duties to aunts and uncles and cousins. Nancy chuckled. Sorry, girls. Maybe you can pick up a clue at the party. Ask your relatives if they ever knew or heard of people named Woonton, who used to live in Berryville. Will do, George promised. The three girls went back to the basement and opened the panel to the secret room. Nancy unlocked the wall cabinet and took out the diary. Then she relocked the cupboard and the panel was closed again. Since Bess and George did not know when they would be able to return, they decided to pack all their clothes and take them home. "I'd enjoy a change of slacks and blouses anyway," said Bess. The cousins had just finished packing when Bess called out, "I heard a car door slam. Perhaps it's Mrs. Bruin arriving." The bell rang, and Nancy hurried to the front door. Hannah Gruen stood there, a broad smile on her face. "Nancy," she said, "this is the first time I've ever tried to substitute for you in solving a mystery." As Nancy gave the housekeeper a hug, she said, "Who knows? Maybe you'll solve it while I'm gone." "Not much likelihood of that," Hannah replied, shaking her head. Nancy took Mrs. Bruin's bag and led the way up the stairs to the second floor. Mrs. Beeling greeted her old friend affectionately. Then Hannah was taken to meet Miss Carter. "I'm sorry you've been having so much trouble," the Drews housekeeper said to her. The actress smiled. "It's said that bad luck comes in threes. I've had mine. First a broken leg, then a mysterious tapper, and finally stolen cats." Mrs. Gruen remarked that with all the locks on the house changed, she did not see how anyone could get inside. "I believe the person who came to steal your Persians the second time got a good scare. I doubt that he'll be back." Hannah's assurances made Miss Carter feel better at once. Soon the three women were engaged in a lively conversation. Nancy, Bess, and George left quietly. "When are you going to get your own car back?" George asked Nancy as they rode off in Ned's convertible. "I don't know. Ned's coming to take me to the rehearsal." When the girls reached Bess's home, Nancy asked the cousins to call her when they were ready to return to Miss Carter's. She dropped George at the Fain house and a few minutes later pulled into her own driveway. As she unlocked the kitchen door, the place seemed very different. For an instant, Nancy wondered why, then realized she missed the fragrant scent of cooking food. There was always a lingering aroma of some special concoction of Hannah's in the air. "It's just not the same without her here," Nancy thought wistfully. Within a few minutes, Mr. Drew drove in. While Nancy was preparing dinner from a menu Hannah had left, the lawyer related what he had found out about the Wontons. "Through a stroke of luck, I got the information from a lawyer friend of mine who is the attorney for the Beverly, a private hospital. It takes boys and young men who are having mental problems of one sort or another. One of their patients was named Gus Wunton. At the time his parents put him there, they were living in Berryville. I haven't found anything yet as to where Mr. and Mrs. William Wunton went after they sold their house." Nancy was excited. "Is this Gus Wunton well enough to be interviewed?" she asked. Mr. Drew's answer was a surprise. "Gus Wunton ran away from the Beverly several weeks ago, and there hasn't been any trace of him since that time." "Oh!" Nancy exclaimed. She told her father of her suspicion that the man using the secret bedroom and bath in the basement of Miss Carter's house might be Gus Wunton. "And he might be the tapper," she added. "You could be right, Nancy. That pudgy man who followed you and who attacked Ned at the school fits the description of the Gus Wunton who ran away. He had a penchant for running away since the time he was a little boy." "You mean running away from home?" Nancy asked. Her father nodded. "Yes, and also from school and camp and at times from hotels when the family was on a trip. When Gus reached his late teens, he became worse. So his parents finally took him to the Beverly." "What about the guardians?" Nancy asked. "There is no mention of them, but the Beverly's lawyer promised to call me if he finds out anything more about the William Wontons." "Are there any Are there no clues as to where Gus was running to this time? Nancy queried. Not one, and I think your guess is as good as anybody else's, her father remarked. Tonight we'll have the police keep an even closer watch on Miss Carter's house. Since all the locks on the entrance doors have been changed, the tapper won't be able to get inside. The officers can close in quickly and grab him if he comes to the house. As Nancy continued preparing the meal, she and her father speculated about whether or not Gus Woonton lived in the house regularly or just slept there once in a while. And was he the tapper? If so, why was he tapping? Was he just acting spooky to annoy the people in the house, hoping to get them out? Or was there a more sinister motive behind his actions? Just as dinner was ready, the bell rang. Ned Nickerson had arrived. At once he asked Nancy if she had solved the mystery. It's not solved, but we have some good clues, she replied, and briefed him on the latest developments. Sounds like progress, all right, he commented. After the meal was over and the kitchen had been tidied, Nancy and Ned had to hurry to make the rehearsal on time. As they walked into the school, a few minutes later, he said, Tonight, instead of sitting in the auditorium, I think I'll play detective and walk around the corridor to keep a lookout for that pudgy fellow. They separated and Nancy went up to the stage. Ned made sure that the front door was securely locked as well as all the side entrances. On one of his trips into the corridor back of the stage, he thought he smelled smoke. It seems to be coming from under the stage, Ned decided, and opened the door to a stairway. He ran down the steps. A thin wisp of smoke was coming from the prop room next to the dressing rooms. A fire extinguisher hung on the wall. He grabbed it. Turning the heavy spray can over, he sent a volume of foam onto a pile of clothes which were on fire in the center of the floor. I hope this does it, he thought. In the meantime, Nancy found herself with a 15-minute recess from the rehearsal. I'll see if Ned has learned anything, she told herself, and went out into the corridor back of the stage. As she neared the doorway to the basement, Nancy smelled smoke. She hurried down the stairway and saw Ned busy with the extinguisher. Oh, Nancy, I'm glad you've come. I'm afraid this is too much a blaze for me to put out alone. Nancy agreed. I'd better call the fire department right away. Good idea, Ned replied. She dashed up the stairway and turned the knob on the door, which had closed. It was locked. Frantically, Nancy knocked on the door, but she had little hope that anyone would hear her. The orchestra was playing loudly. Nevertheless, she thumped until her knuckles hurt. Still, no one came to the open door. We are going to start chapter 8 shortly. I'm just checking something quick. I will be back shortly. Weird day. This will be the last chapter read, chapter 8, Missing Diary. For a moment, Nancy panicked. The situation was desperate. She and Ned must get out of the basement. She continued to pound her fists on the door and yell as loudly as she could, but the orchestra was still playing a lively number, and it drowned out her frantic cries. Maybe there's another exit from the prop room, Nancy told herself. Though the smoke was now thick, she went back down the stairs. Her smarting eyes caught sight of another fire extinguisher hanging on the wall. She grabbed it off the hook. Before using it, Nancy ran into the powder room and held 2 towels under a faucet. When they were soaking wet, she hurried to Ned's side and handed one to him. He quickly tied it over his nose and mouth, while Nancy put the other one across hers. Are the firemen coming? Let's get out of here, Ned said grimly. We can't. The door's locked, and nobody heard me yelling. Ned did not answer. He grabbed the new extinguisher, which was more effective, and played it on the flames. Nancy sprayed a stream with the one he had used. Finally, the blaze began to die down. The couple started looking for another exit, but there was none. As they went up the smoke-filled stairway, the door to the corridor suddenly opened. There were exclamations of dismay from above. There's a fire in the prop room, a man exclaimed. Call the fire department, quick, call the police. Nancy and Ned scooted up and explained to them what had happened. You put out that fire? A girl asked unbelievingly. Why, it's Nancy Drew. Oh, I think you're wonderful. I can never be that brave. This is my friend Ned Nickerson, Nancy said. He discovered the fire and should get the credit. Other members of the cast and the director now crowded around the couple and demanded to hear the whole story. Nancy and Ned quickly explained, then asked who had locked the door to the basement. Everyone denied having done it or had been downstairs. I'm sure, said Nancy, that the fire was set deliberately. What? Mr. Skink cried out. By this time, firemen and police had arrived. After an examination of the prop room, they agreed that the fire was of an incendiary nature. Someone had deliberately placed costumes in a heap on the floor, oil-soaked them, and started the blaze. How wicked! A young woman cried out. Nancy and Ned had been whispering about the possibility that the pudgy man might have been the one who had done it. They speculated that possibly he had sneaked into the building while the actors and actresses were arriving. The couple queried each one in the cast, but none of them had seen anyone who fitted that description. We have no leads at all, Nancy said, disappointed. One may turn up, Ned replied. The police will probably find something. The firemen and police were sure that the arsonist had escaped. Nevertheless, each classroom was thoroughly searched, but they found no one. One officer said, What I'd like to know is his motive for starting the fire. It's rather far-fetched, but it is possible that someone who was turned down for a part in the play became disgruntled and wanted revenge. Mr. Skink, do you by any chance know of such a person? No, the director answered quickly, but I understand there's a gang of firebugs around here. I'm inclined to think those bad boys are responsible. By this time, the odor from the smoke had permeated the stage. Between this unpleasantness and the fact that many of the players were upset by the unfortunate affair, the director dismissed them all for the night. I'm glad to go, Nancy said to Ned. I couldn't possibly ever first my part. All I want to do is get home and shampoo my hair. It smells of smoke, and my clothes do too. Then she changed the subject. If the arsonist was Gus, why do you think he did it? And why did he take such drastic measures? Ned reminded Nancy that a person with Gus's reputation was unpredictable. He could be capable of almost anything. It's my guess he's trying to harm you or me, Nancy, so you won't be able to continue with the case. Then he'd be free to carry on his tapping without interruption. Nancy frowned. You mean he would go so far as to hope you'd run downstairs to the fire and I'd follow? If we didn't, he'd let the fire eat up through the stage and maybe harm people? Who knows what that idiot had in mind, Ned remarked angrily. Do you think he locked the door? Yes. When they reached the Drew house, Nancy's father was just driving in from a meeting he had attended. He was amazed that the rehearsal was over so early, but even more amazed when he heard the reason for it. I don't like what's going on, Mr. Drew said. By the way, I have learned nothing more about Gus Wonton, or his parents, or the whereabouts of any of them. Nancy suggested that they could look through Gus's diary to see if they could find any clues. She brought the book down from her bedroom, and the three took turns reading from it while they ate some cookies and Coke Nancy had brought in. I'd say Gus is lucky to be out of prison, Ned remarked after reading several items. Man, the things he pulled, even as a kid. Mr. Drew nodded. I don't see how his parents stood it, and Gus was pretty cool about it all. Listen to this item. August 28th. We're still at the Grand Hotel, and everybody in it bores me. This morning I sneaked off before breakfast and helped myself to a motorboat. Boy, did I have fun. Scared a lot of people on the lake half out of their wits. I pulled in near a dock where I saw a man's clothes. Guess he'd gone swimming, and there was a wallet just waiting for me to take it. I'd say the guy is an egomaniac, the lawyer added. The last notation on the diary Mr. Drew pointed out had been written 4 years before, on the day Gus had been taken to Beverly. This puzzled Nancy. If Gus had recently visited his old home, why hadn't he written this in his diary? Maybe it's a friend of Gus's who comes there, she said. Dad, would you find out from Beverly whether Gus had a pal who might have left there about the same time he did? I'll do it tomorrow, her father promised. Ned said he must leave. Nancy, if you don't need my car anymore, I'll take it. All right, I guess there's no use in my trying to fool anyone. The following morning, Nancy hurried down to the kitchen to prepare her father's breakfast. While the oatmeal was cooking, Nancy decided to check a couple of items in the diary. She had put it on a table in the living room. Why, it's gone, Nancy exclaimed when she saw the book was not on the table. After a moment's thought, she decided that her father probably had taken it upstairs when he went to bed. But a few minutes later, when he came down to breakfast, Mr. Drew said he had not carried it to his room. I didn't touch it. Father and daughter stared at each other for several seconds. It must have been stolen, Nancy said slowly. The Drews quickly checked doors and windows. All were locked, and chains on the front and back doors were in place. Nothing else had been taken. Someone got in here somehow, the lawyer said, setting his jaw firmly. Puzzled, Nancy and her father ran upstairs. The only windows which were open were those in their bedrooms. The Drews could find no evidence on any of them that an intruder had entered the house. The screens were locked in place and there were no holes in them. Furthermore, no personal property had been removed. Nancy hurried to the third floor, followed by her father. Certainly, someone had gained access to the house. Nancy said, since the intruder wanted the diary, it's apparent he was Gus or a friend of his. It looks that way, Mr. Drew agreed. No burglar was in sight, but a window at the far end of the attic was wide open. There was no screen in it. We never leave that window open, said Nancy. But only a human fly could climb up here on the outside, Mr. Drew declared. Um, Thank you so much for visiting on this early tide. I'm glad that the waves took you in and that we are able to read more. And I can't wait to start reading chapter 9 next Saturday. Ooh. Again, I'm Desert Mermaid. It's been nice to meet you. And until next time, thanks for swimming by.